Pleasure. Okay, so what have we been doing recently in our lessons? So lesson 1 was all about what we call central tendency, right? So where is the middle of the data? And lesson 2 was about how spread out the data is, or what we call dispersion, measures of dispersion. Now, what I want to see in the chat is I want to see from everyone in the class, what were the things we were calculating in the last lesson for measures of dispersion? What were the key ideas, or maybe somebody could even raise their hand. What were the key things that we did in the previous lesson as you think back to last week, Wednesday? Aha, Awami, I like it. IQR, interquartile range. There was the range. And what other words or things did we have to calculate? So in the semi-interquartile range, so in order to find the interquartile range, we had to find things called quartiles. And in the case of the interquartile range, it was Q3 minus Q1. We also spoke about Q2, and Q2, the second quartile, is the same as the median. So that was the main ideas that we dealt with, and just making sure that we knew how to work out what quartiles were, what range was, etc. Now, in today's lesson, we're going to talk initially about something called percentiles. And we're also going to learn how to calculate something called the standard deviation. Okay. Now, these are both also measures of spread, or they help us understand how spread out the data is. And later in the course, we will come back to the standard deviation and we'll cover it in more detail. Today, we're just going to be learning how to use our calculator efficiently. So if you haven't already, you need to have your calculator on standby. Okay. Then, if there's time in the lesson, we're also going to do something called the 5-number summary. And the 5-number summary is basically just the minimum value in a data set, Q1, Q2, Q3, and the maximum value. So you can see those 5 values are called the 5-number summary of a data set. Sometimes we talk about little n, but it's not specifically included in the 5-number summary, but we sometimes write it next to the 5-number summary. So that's what we'll have to work out today. We'll have to work out some 5-number summaries for a data set. And then we draw a graph of a 5-number summary called a box-and-whisker plot. And the box-and-whisker plot is drawn directly from the 5-number summary. Okay, so that's roughly where we're going to be playing around today. And so are there any questions before I get going? Are there any questions from the class? Okay. In that case, let's start with percentiles. So if we look at what a percentile is, here's a little example that I've drawn up here. If you imagine people standing sort of from shortest to tallest, okay, so this is this little example I've got going on here. And if you imagine there are 20 people in a group, okay, and you are over here. This position over here is called the 80th percentile, or P80, because 80% of the data is below and 20% of the data is above. So we could say the second quartile is the 50th percentile because essentially it's the same thing. Or we could say Q1 is the same as the 25th percentile because it's a quarter of the way through the data. So we could say Q1 is the same as the 25th percentile, or P25, and Q2 is the same as P50. Q3 is the same as P75. However, we also get things like P80, which is the 80th percentile in a data set. Now, what I want to do is I want to give you an example of how this works. So I've got a data set here, and I'm going to try and find the 80th percentile, or P80, for this data set. So what do I need to do? Well, first of all, I need to know how many items are there in my data set. And I'm going to say that there are 29 items in the data set. I know because I counted them before I started. Now, when we worked out the median in the previous lesson, what did we always do first? We didn't go straight to the median. We did something first. Can anyone remember what that first step was? Yes, it was the position. Okay. So before we work out P80, we have to work out the position of P80. So how do we do that? Well, all we do is we go 80 over 100 times n plus 1, where n is the number of items in the data set. So what I want you to do for me now is I want you guys to work out the position of the 80th percentile. Now, we're not working out the 80th percentile itself yet. I'm just asking you to work out the 80th percentile, its position. Okay, so I want you to use your calculators and think about what n has to be, and then I want you to work out what the position of P80 is going to be. Put it in the chat there. So I know this is going to be 29 plus 1. And so that's going to be, let's work it out, 0.8 times 30. So this is the 24th position. Okay. So now what I want you to do is, if the 80th percentile is in the 24th position, I want you to count from the beginning. So that's position 1, position 2, position 3. I want you to get me the value of P80 now. What is the value of the 80th percentile? And I want you to try and count through the stem and leaf plot to find that. The good news is percentiles feel a lot like quartiles. There's only 1 or 2 little differences. So the question is, you know that the position of the 80th percentile is the 24th position. What is the value of the 80th percentile? So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. And so the value of the 80th percentile is 53. If we look at our data set, there's a lot of data below 53. There's not a lot of data above 53. So in Django, what I did was we first found the position in the list. So I counted from the very beginning. And if you imagine going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I went and I counted up to the 24th position, I would get to this one over here, which is 53. And so we say the 80th percentile is 53. Now, I want to ask, there may be some questions about this, but I want you guys to work out for me the 60th percentile. So this is the second question of the day. And for those who are feeling comfortable, I want you to go ahead and try and find it. What is the value of the 60th percentile? Now, the only difference, well, actually, let's first of all let you do that. Try and find the 60th percentile, and then I'll give you some feedback. And it's the same data set, so we're still working with that. Okay, so step one is to first find the position of P60. Once you found the position, you can then go from there. So be careful, guys. There's a difference between the position and the value. Let me put this for now. So I'm going to go 60 over 100 times n plus 1. And what is the n going to be? It's going to be 29 plus 1. So, okay, so the position is the 18th position in the list. So now that I've got the 18th position, I have to then work out I need to count to the 18th position. And I see a few answers are coming through, but I want a few more people to put their answers down, and then I'll kind of go from there. So 1, 2, 3, 15, 16, 17, 18. And so we should get 31. So just give me a quick in the chat, because there's lots of students in the room. Give me a thumbs up if you've understood it so far, and a thumbs down if you're feeling a bit lost. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to choose a situation where the position value is a fraction, because I want to make sure we understand what happens if there's a fraction, because we need to actually round off with percentiles. So let me choose for the next question. I want you to find me the 86th percentile. So we'll call this, in fact, let's make it, what number won't go in? Let's make it the 88th percentile. So I want you to find me the 88th percentile, which is going to mean first finding its position. I want to see if this is a fraction, what do I need to do? What's the rule with percentiles? But go ahead first, and then in the chat, I want you to put the position. We'll call this answer A and this answer B. So find me the 88th percentile. Okay. Now, what happens when there's a fraction? I see some of you are giving me 26.4. So let's see if I get that. So you do get 26.4. Okay, now what happens in this situation? Now, when you are dealing with percentiles, you do not average them out. You go to the position that is closest. Okay, so when you deal with percentiles. Now, with quartiles, we're different. With quartiles, if you fell between two positions, you average them out. With percentiles, you go to the position that's nearest. And the nearest position is going to be 26th. So it's the 26th position, because 0.4 is closer to 26 than it is to 27. So if you know it's the 26th position, I want to know what is the value of P88. to the 26th position. Where is the 26th position going to be? So if I count it, I suppose I could count from the back, because this is 29, this is 28, 27, 26. And so if we think about it, that makes sense, because if you're in the 88th percentile, you'd expect most of the data to be behind you and only a small bit of the data to be above you. And so the 88th percentile in this data set is going to be the value of 58. Okay, so are there any questions or comments? Or if you feel comfortable with calculating percentiles, give us a thumbs up. If you have a question, pop it in the chat or raise your hand. The good news is percentiles are almost exactly the same as quartiles. The only difference is for the position, you round off. But you still use the same method where you start by calculating the position and then you find the number. It's just this little bit where instead of averaging them out, you round off to the nearest number. Okay, well then we are going to move on and we're going to put a tick behind percentiles. So, sir, can you please show how you got 58? So, Rosario, all I did was I went to the 26th position in the list. So if you think of this list, there's 29 items in my data set. Now, the other thing I didn't mention, but you actually have to make sure is the data going from smallest to biggest? It's already arranged from smallest to biggest. So the 26th position, if I counted from the beginning, would take a long time. But because this is 29, that would be 28, 27. And so that's the 26th position, which is the value 58. This is something called a stem and leaf plot. Okay. Oriana, you have a question? I'm going to unmute you. Oriana, do you want to unmute? Or is that maybe it's just a hand that is... Okay, maybe it's just the hand that went up by mistake. Okay, so what is the second thing we're going to learn today? So this is a very common exam question, and it's something called the standard deviation. And what the standard deviation measures is how far away are you from the mean? So how far on average are you away from the mean? And so this is the formula that we use for it. Now, again, another little quick hand vote. Have you, in class, have you dealt with the standard deviation? So give me a thumbs up if you have. Give me a thumbs down if you've never dealt with the standard deviation before. Okay, so there's quite a mixture in the group. Some of you have seen it before, some of you haven't. And so I'm rather going to go a little bit more slowly on the slow side. Okay. So this fancy looking equation, in reality, what do you actually need to know? You need to know how to calculate the standard deviation. And we are going to use the calculator or your calculator to help us do it. In reality, what is happening when you find a standard deviation is this little symbol here is the mean, and you subtract whatever each data point from the mean, and you find sort of the difference. Then you square it, then you divide by the number of items, and then you square root. Now, this feels like a bit of a mouthful. So the good news is all you really need to know is the standard deviation is how far away on average are you from the mean. So an example that I can give you from this call is, if you imagine the height of everybody in the Zoom call, if we only got the standard deviation of the girls in the group in the Zoom call, the standard deviation would be low because the group of data of girls, their height is going to be closer together on average. Whereas if we took the heights of boys and girls and calculated the standard deviation, it would be higher, because on average, you'd be further away from the middle. That's one way of thinking about it. But I think what we should do is just calculate it first. So let's go through an exam question and learn how to do this. And what I have brought with me is I have brought my calculator, which I'm hoping you guys will be able to see. So let's get rid of that. So give me a thumbs up in the chat if you can see my calculator. Okay, now we're going to calculate the standard deviation of this data set over here. And what we are going to do is we are going to go to the mode button. I'm going to click on the mode button. And when I click on the mode button, can you see that there's a stat thing? So you basically hit mode and then you choose 2 for stat. Okay, then what you're going to do, but let's actually write this down as we go. So step 1 was mode, then we went 2, and then we're going to hit 1. And what 1 does is it takes us to var or variance, but essentially it allows us to put a data set into my calculator. Now, I want you to follow along with your calculator at home. We are going to put this data set into our calculator. We go 356 equals 525 equals 743 equals. And I want you to do this. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm putting these items into the memory of my calculator. And 1, 2, 1 equals 2, 1, 9 equals 2. Equals 865 equals. So I should have 12 items that are in my calculator's memory. So what do we do after that? That is the next question. Let's see if I've given enough time for students to put the data in their calculators. Wait a little bit more time. So at this point, you are going to hit the AC button. Now you may think, oh my goodness, all hope is lost. I've now lost all my data, but you haven't lost all your data. You guys have done this before. You click shift. Okay, so the next thing is to go shift and then hit 1. And you get that thing over there. Shift and then 1. Then the next, the part of the window that you want is 4 again. It's that var thing. So shift 1 and then 4. And then you get this set of choices. Now, if you choose the number 3, you are going to get the standard deviation. If you choose the number 2, you would get the mean. So because I want the standard deviation, well, I want the mean and the standard deviation, but I want you guys to get, let's see what we get. So we get 3, and then I'm going to hit equals. And for some reason, my calculator is being a bit funny with its symbols, but I'll check my answer in a moment. So it's equals. Are you getting 220.20? Let's just check my answers. Yes, we are getting the right answer. Thank goodness. Okay. So I want to make sure that you guys are getting a standard deviation of 220.20. Then, if you've got that correct, I want you to try and find the mean using the same menu. So if you hit AC again, and you go Shift, Stat, you then click 4, and I want you to then hit 2 for the mean, and then you get equals. And check that you get 501. Okay. So this is quite a technical thing to do, but if you do it a couple of times, I promise it becomes so much easier. So my mean should be 501. Okay, so I'm going to go over this again. So there's 2 steps in the process. So let me clear everything. So the very first step was to put the data into the calculator's memory, to change into statistical mode, and then put it into the calculator's memory. That basically was this step over here. Then to go into basically get the answer mode, you click Shift, Stat, or Shift 1. So it was this part over here. And then I clicked 4 for var, for variance. And then all I had to do after that was choose if I wanted the standard deviation. If I wanted the standard deviation, I choose 3. If I wanted the mean, I chose 2. Okay. So I think that what we need to do is we need to do another one of these and check our answer. Okay. So if I would say take a screenshot of the process if you need to. Also, now that I want to clear the memory in my calculator. I want to do a different question. I'm going to go mode. So let's just watch this again. So mode 1, and then I'm back into computational mode. Now, when I go back into statistical mode, so I mode 2, 1, you'll see that my data has been removed. And so because the data has been removed, I can go on to the next question. So let's do that. I'm going to give you this multiple choice question, and you need to use your calculator to figure out the answer. So it says here, 10 friends scored the following marks in their end of year exam. You need to put these data points into your calculator, 23, 37, 45, and so on, and then work out the standard deviation, and then choose the option that you think is correct. And I will let you go ahead. For those who need me to do another example, watch me as I do this now. So let's go. So I'll make sure I'm in stat mode. So mode 2, 1. Now I'm going to go 23. And I want you to do it along with me. See if you get the... And the fact that my data set goes up to 10 makes me feel good there. Now that I've finished putting my data in, I go AC, then I go Shift, Stat, and because I want the standard deviation, I'm going to go 4, and then I'm going to go 3. Now I've still got one more step to go. What are you guys getting? So 16.87, and if I round that up, I should get 16.9, which is option C. Yeah, 16.9. So I want to know, it's looking pretty good from what I'm seeing in the chat. If this is your first lesson, it might be a bit confusing, but yeah, it looks to me like you guys have learned how to calculate the standard deviation. Are there any questions or comments on that? You obviously probably a good idea to practice a bit more. We'll do one more after the break. Yeah.
It looks like Ayanda's hand is raised.
Okay. We can unmute Ayanda. Let's go to her. Hi, Ayanda. Can you hear me? You want to unmute yourself, Ayanda?
She says, I'm a bit lost.
Okay. We'll do another example after the break. But for now, I think what we need is a little bit of a brain break. So I want everybody, well, to stand up on their feet. We've been going for half an hour, and I think what we really need is a bit of a stretch. So I want everyone to stand up and just do your favorite stretch to give your brain a little bit of a break, because we've been working hard. Just roll those shoulders. Oh, I'm seeing some very good stretches. There we go. There we go.
Come on, guys, give yourselves a break.
Oh, I like that. I like that that wave. Who is that that's doing?
Dagaza.
Okay.
Looking good, guys, looking good.
There we go. Oh, Chapang, yes, there we go. Stretch out that chest there. There we go.
Duelo, nolazi.
All right. That's good. Good. Okay, here's the brain break for today. So can you figure out what is this thing over here? And while we do that, let me go back to just using just the OneNote thing. Level, can you just see my OneNote screen now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, what do we think this pattern? I'll give you a little hint. These two interact to give me this one. These two interact to give me this one. These two interact. That's my tip. Now, if you keep following that idea, what do you think is going to happen? Oh, geez, the answers are flying in. Well, okay. Was that too easy?
On top of this.
Okay, so clearly the pattern is to multiply two adjacent numbers. So 2 times 6 will give you 12, 6 times 3. And so to get the answer, you should get 216. Oh,
Well done,
I think
guys.
you guys are just getting quick. That's what's happening.
Yes. The student has become the master.
Exactly. Force is strong with them.
Mr. S, can you please lower your camera?
Oh, yes. Can you see me now? I seem to have lost
Yes.
my... Okay. All right. Let's do another one of these standard deviation questions. Let's do one more and then we'll move on just to make sure everybody's on the same page. I'm not going to show the calculator this time, but I will kind of remember that you need to go, it's mode 2 and then 1 and then see what you can remember.
Can you please try to be a bit slow because you're moving?
Okay, cool. Am I going a little bit quickly there? All right. So should I bring up my calculator again? So maybe I should bring it up.
Mr. S?
Yeah.
There was a question in the chat it says ACMAC, but I don't really understand it. I think they're trying to ask if there will be a question where you have to calculate the standard deviation without using a calculator.
Yeah, it's very unlikely at this stage. So I would say that it's far more likely that you'll have to use your calculator to find the standard deviation, and then you have to ask an interpretive question. It just takes too long to calculate the standard deviation manually. It's just not practical, is the honest answer. Yeah. So I would just worry about, can you get the calculator working? And then we'll talk about interpreting later on. Okay, so just to remind everyone, we would go mode, then 2, and then 1, and you have to put your data set into your calculator. And then I obviously I'm not going to have time to do that right now, but 271 and then 354, and you go through that process, and then once you've done that, you go shift stat So shift stat, and then 4, and then you choose one of those. So I'm lucky though that I do have the answer here, so I'll reveal that in a moment. Lusanda, what's your question?
So I see that we only use the calculator way to calculate the standard deviation, but in class
Yeah.
I learned that you take the values that you were given and then you minus them by the mean to get the standard deviation at the end, and you still get the same value.
Yeah, okay. So this is the question about doing it manually or not. So because of time, the standard deviation can take a really long time to calculate manually. And so if you do it manually, you're basically going to be using this formula over here, but they would always give you a template to follow. Does that make sense? So, but the 90% of the time, the exam question is going to be where you have to work out the standard deviation and then apply it to a question. And so that's what I'm focusing on for now. Okay, just because of time.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Pleasure. So you should get the answer of 22.6, which should be A. So A should be your answer. Kukle, what's your question? Yeah.
Hi, sir. I was just wondering if we have to order the numbers in ascending order, or does the
Oh,
order
good
not really
question.
matter?
Okay. So with the standard deviation, you do not need to order the numbers. You do not need to order the numbers. So
Right, thank
did
you,
everyone get the question? So yeah, the calculator does the work for you, but the formula doesn't require, if you look at the formula, let me go back to it for a moment. There's no need to order the numbers because they're differences, and the differences then get squared and added up. So it's the one where you don't need to order it. Okay. Are there any other questions on the standard deviation? Because what I want you to do is just watch this video again and just practice it and make sure you've got this process down. Lasanda, yeah, what's your question?
So I wanted to know if we only gonna calculate the standard deviation in this lesson and we leave out the variance, because I see that the value of the standard deviation is the square root of the variance.
Okay, exactly. So basically, again, the variance is also not very common, but if you want to work out the variance, all you do, the standard deviation is that symbol. You simply square the standard deviation if you want to work out what the variance is. But again, if I look at past exam papers, the word variance is not a super common one. They more likely ask you standard deviation and then how to interpret the standard deviation. Okay, cool. All right. So we're going to come back to standard deviation at a later stage, but I wanted to make sure everybody knew how to do it on their calculators. So for the last part of today's lesson, we are going to do something called the 5-number summary. Okay, so 5-number summary. What's in the 5-number summary? It's the smallest value, it's the biggest value, and then it's Q1, Q2, and Q3. So once we have got the 5-number summary, we can then talk about drawing something called a box and whisker plot, but we're not going to have time for that today. So all I want to do now is I want you guys to work out the 5-number summary for me for this data set. Okay. So over to you guys. The tip I'm going to give you is for Q1, Q2, and Q3, you need to first find the positions. So find the positions of them and then work out the values. The list here is ordered from smallest to biggest. Smallest to biggest. And you can pop your answers in the chats. So Bandile, what part are you struggling with? I just want to check. Is it it might be that your calculator is not on the right setting, maybe? That is one possibility. So what are the values for min, Q1, Q2, Q3, and max? And remember, you have to also do a little bit of working first. Like, what's the position? I suppose we should count how many numbers there are. 1, 2. So n is 15. The number of items in the data set is 15. So what I've done is I've figured out the positions, but I haven't figured out the values yet. So you still need to give me the values. Keep them coming in the chat. Let's see them. Okay, so you're right. The minimum value Awami is 503 and the max is 526 because those, you can kind of see they're at either end of this place. And then what are Q1, Q2, and Q3 going to be? So if I'm in the 4th position, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think that's the 4th position. So it should be 507. And then for the 8th position, it should be 510. And what about the 12th position? 10. Keep those answers coming. What's Q3 going to be equal to? So it's going to be 515. Okay, so as we move towards the end of this lesson, a 5-number summary includes these particular numbers, and it's sometimes written like this: min, Q1, Q2, Q3, and max, or you just see it written like this, where they just write the numbers in order like this. And they just give you the 5 numbers and they say, this is the 5-number summary. And then you need to know kind of what they mean by that. Okay, so I would like to know, are there some questions from the class or places where that I've lost you before we start to get towards the end of the lesson? I'll do a little preview of the next lesson if there are no immediate questions, though. I just want to give a chance for questions from the class. Okay. So it may be that for some of you rewatching this lesson, especially the calculator bit, could be useful. And if we look at, I maybe did this little bit here a little bit quickly, so you may also want to go over this part here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions from the class. What I do want to do then is just say, in the next lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to draw a graph of a box and whisker plot. And what the box and whisker does is it takes these 5 numbers and it puts them onto a graph that looks a little bit like this. It's called a box and whisker because it has a box and 2 whiskers, essentially. And below the box and whisker chart, we normally have a number line. And so again, this will be the next lesson's content, but basically we'll have our box and whisker plots. It'll look like that. And each of these lines has a particular value. So in the box and whisker plot, this is the minimum. This is Q1. This is Q2. This is Q3. And this is the max. And below it, we will have the number line that tells us kind of what's going on. So that's going to be the topic of the next lesson. How do we go from a 5-number summary to a box and whisker plot? Okay, but then no more for today. Are there any final questions? Otherwise, Lebo, if we could put the poll out to the students, that would be fantastic. And yeah, guys, I hope that I hope that you learned something today. And we went through, in revising now, we went through percentiles, we went through the standard deviation, and we also did the 5-number summary a little bit. And that was the story of today. Yes.
Sorry, Mr. S. There's a question from Oriane.
Okay, Gorian, let's go to you. Can you unmute, please? I have a few too many things on my screen.
Okay, sir, can you hear me?
Can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, so I wanted to ask, so in every statistical question or situation, is the Q2 always the median?
Say that again. Is the Q2O? Oh,
Always
is
the
Q2?
median.
Oh,
Is
yes,
it always the
Q2
median?
is always the median. It's a synonym. It's the same word. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Pleasure.